Thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. It's so nice to see so many faces that I haven't seen in person in a while. I certainly miss seeing all of you on a regular basis in person. The video conferencing is a good substitute, but it certainly isn't as good as seeing you and chatting with you at the coffee bar at T-Rex or being at a Venture Cafe event. So hopefully we'll get to do more of that not too far in the distant future, but we certainly do miss seeing all of your happy faces in real time versus on video. So thanks for joining us today. This is we're going to go over our 2019 impact report, which fundamentally is our annual report, and all of the great things that were accomplished by our organization and our entrepreneurs in 2019. So it's always good to just take a moment and pause and look back on everything that's been accomplished. And to tell that story, we've invited 3 of our entrepreneurs to participate in this presentation today, because we believe that you really are much more informed and energized when you hear directly from our entrepreneurs. So with that, we'll get started and talk about some of the key highlights of 2019. And as you know, just kind of laying the baseline, we work with entrepreneurs at, the slide's not advancing, but we work with entrepreneurs really mostly in their first 5 years. So really from the time they get that idea in their head through prototype and customer validation into MVP and market entry and growth and scaling. And, our programs and services support them along that journey, and as do our mentors, who are an incredible service and resource for our entrepreneur community. But last year, we onboarded about 78 new companies to ITEN, which is pretty consistent. We've been really holding at that number very consistently for the last 5 years. We had a little bit of spike a couple of years ago, almost hit 100, but didn't quite get there. But 75 has been a kind of our pretty consistent number year over year. And most of those companies are like not exactly thirds, but most of them are idea stage, roughly about 30%. And then, sorry, we're having a little problem with the slides not advancing. And our cute faces, yeah. If Melissa, I'm gonna bounce you around. If we can you go to the pathway slide, and then I wanna bounce back. But so 78 of those companies, as I was saying, 29% are at idea or concept stage, and then about roughly 35% are prototype and MVP, and 27% market entry. So we are heavily weighted towards kind of the front end of that before they hit growth and scaling. And on this map, I think the key thing that most people know about ITEN is that our mentors play an incredible and important role all the way through that process. And on this map, the blue flags represent ITEN programs. So we do have programs that support our entrepreneurs throughout that journey as well. And then I'm going to ask Melissa to pop back to our slide with our happy faces on it. And we do this with a very lean and mean staff, and I don't mean mean in the bad way. Well, some of you might think we're mean sometimes. I don't know. It depends upon the feedback you might be getting. But, a wonderful staff, including Melissa, who's over entrepreneur development, Connie, business development, and our 2 entrepreneurs in residence who are our power mentors, Quentin Ortega and Stephen Van Rant. So, kind of leading the charge. If you haven't met all of us, you've probably met quite a few of us along the way. So we'll go on, Melissa, to the next slide. And so people often ask us too, so who are these brave souls, that these entrepreneurs that are going out and wanting to start businesses? So we track that information about the founders who start these new companies. And almost 60% of them are first-time entrepreneurs. So it's really important that they have the resources that ITEN provides to them to help them along the way. They may be subject matter experts in a particular area, but may not really know about what it takes to launch a business. Most importantly here, I want to point out is that ITEN is very committed to diversity and inclusion. And we've been working for several years now, probably almost 5 years, in two organizations that we've had a lead role or supporting role in organizing: the Vision Symposium and the St. Louis Equity and Entrepreneurship, which is really focused on making sure that the communities we engage are diverse, and we do that in an inclusive way. And these are some of the numbers that show that we're doing that. And I'm particularly proud of the fact that our female entrepreneur numbers have grown once again significantly this year. There's actually a 30% uptick in female entrepreneurs that started companies and became ITEN companies in the last year. So we will continue with our commitment and focus on diversity and inclusion, and we'll continue to expect to see these numbers reflect that year over year. So in the end, what really matters is the success of our startups. And so we look at that really in a couple primary areas. It's how are they doing in the areas of innovation, and how are they doing with regard to building and standing up businesses that fundamentally deliver economic impact to the region. And so on the economic impact side of things, we look at jobs and the number of jobs they create each year and in total. So 240 jobs last year created by our startups. And they generated $39 million in annual payroll and roughly $3 million in monthly revenue. And on the innovation side of things, we look at that as well. So for instance, last year, they were very productive. They launched 35 MVPs and 37 commercial new products, and 15 patent applications were submitted with 4 patents awarded. So again, just looking at our measure of success is the success of the entrepreneurs that we support and serve. So then you say, well, how do we do that? So this is where I want to take a minute and give thanks to one of the key components of ITEN programming, which is our mentors. And our mentors are subject matter experts across industry who volunteer their time free of charge to help the entrepreneurs that are members of ITEN. And last year we onboarded 20 new mentors to our community. And this is the list of our current mentors who provided over 2,000 hours of programming and mentoring, all at no cost. So all free of charge to the startups in our community. So a big thank you goes out to us, from us to our mentors. We rely on you greatly. We value you greatly and appreciate what you do for the entrepreneurs in ITEN's community. And so with that, I think I'd like to pause and introduce you to Gennaro Moore, who is the founder of Motor Parts Nation, and let her share, provide an update about her venture and share with us her experience working with some of ITEN's mentors. So Gennaro, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Gennaro Moore. I am native of St. Louis, and I lived in Atlanta for over 10 years and lived in Dubai for a few years. And that's what jump-started my career in the automotive field, living in a totally different market. When I came back to St. Louis as a business owner, I started knocking on different doors in the city, had no idea about the ecosystem here for entrepreneurs, but I surely found out, because in my journey, when I started, it was an idea, but it was an idea already in motion. So when I started knocking on the doors of different entrepreneurs, and for ITEN, it was a huge unmatched support that most entrepreneurs would not receive in many major cities. So I have to take pride in the fact that the ecosystem here fully helps entrepreneurs, even though I'm sure ITEN gets a lot of people that may come in and waste time. But I see that ITEN sitting there a couple of times, that they have a good filter to understand that it's this entrepreneur going somewhere, this entrepreneur needs more support. So they would always divert an entrepreneur to say, hey, maybe you need to check out this boot camp, or maybe you need to check out some books to read, or anything that can help the entrepreneur. I've never seen ITEN turn anyone away, in which I thought that was so amazing, because the doors that we're able to knock on. So my company, Motor Parts Nation, is transforming the lives of auto mechanics in West Africa. Can you imagine living in a country where you have to pay cash for your vehicle? Most of the citizens in West Africa, they can't rely on a bank for a car finance loan. So typically they pay cash. So you're talking about tens of thousands of dollars for a vehicle. So you can imagine buying a new car, and then naturally if it breaks down, which cars always do, then imagine trying to find a mechanic that can fix it. Well, 80% of the time, most mechanics in the country have not been properly trained. And I thought, well, I don't want to come into the market and just focus on selling auto parts from America. I wanted to find solutions around this. So within what I do, I don't just focus on selling auto parts. I also focus on technically training, upgrading, and empowering the mechanic. As you can see in my logo, it's a crown. It's a crown that represents empowerment. The colors is black and gold. As you know, gold is well known in Africa, but I think that the more I focus on the empowering words for my company, I was able to attract and pivot during this pandemic. As you may know, auto repair is an essential business. And by being essential, it's essential anywhere in the world. I spent the first 2 months of the pandemic, you know, the country that I serve is Ghana, and they were on lockdown. We were on lockdown. As everyone's on lockdown, I didn't stress myself. I just said, maybe it's a time to take a break. But it wasn't even a time to take a break. It was a time for me to inspire and motivate other entrepreneurs and other people and share resources. I didn't care if I shared a link that would possibly make you a competitor for a grant. It didn't matter to me. I just wanted to share it. It was just for me to share it. And as I spent time motivating others, it was up until now where my company is actually partnering with the biggest Pan-African bank. I didn't expect this to happen, but they operate in over 35 countries, which allows my company to expand a lot further once I'm at the stage when I want to focus on expansion. So the bank has allowed me to add a fintech aspect to my business. So the mechanics in the market that we work on, they use a lot of cash. We're taking that cash and actually funding it through the bank's digital transactions, which is a deal unheard of. They could have worked with companies in the market that make millions of dollars, but they chose to work with mine because of the social responsibility aspect component. If you look at CEOs such as Jack Dorsey, Mark Zuckerberg, Jack Ma, they are in Africa all over the place trying to get a piece of what's there, what business opportunities are there. And if you follow any business giants and their moves, their maneuvers, then it's a sure shot that it's a great market to be in. And I'm so thankful that ITEN Mentorship has tremendously took me from one stage to the next. And I'm still even using ITEN at this stage just because of the resources that it allows me to have. And one day, you know, I'll possibly be a mentor to help other entrepreneurs in St. Louis that may need the support.
We would love that, Gennaro. And I'm sure all the lessons that you've learned and experiences you had would be absolutely invaluable to other entrepreneurs. So, and I know as a founder, you're very, very busy, but even if you have time today, we'd take your time today. So one of the things that we're founded on is the concept of entrepreneurs helping other entrepreneurs. Thank you for sharing your story. And so we want to skip ahead to our programs and services. Just want to reinforce, you know, a lot of times because the mentors are so incredibly helpful and valuable, and studies have shown that mentoring fortifies the success of startup companies, that when people talk about who is ITEN, people kind of default and say, well, they're that company that mentors tech startups. But we just wanted to take a moment and kind of, you know, go through and remind everybody that, and we've added some new programs, but, you know, in addition to our very valuable mentoring services, we do have programs that offer entrepreneurs structural education and guidance in their journey. So Eureka, founder to founder, pitch practice. We have the member perks, so our members get some discounts on professional services, and then our union platform, which is available to our mentors and our startups, allows our community to engage and talk with each other. And so at this time, I want to introduce Burl Stamp, who's the founder of Stamp and Chase, and his product is My Team. And Burl is going to share a little bit of information about his experience engaging in some of ITEN's programs. Burl?
Thanks, Emil. I really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this program this afternoon to talk about an organization that's really been so valuable to me, ITEN. Our company has developed a SaaS platform called My Team that helps managers become more inspired leaders. And we do that by making it easier for them to implement evidence-based practices that we know improve employee engagement and as a result, improve operating performance. Our platform then helps those inspired leaders sustain those practices over time. Said another way, we're a performance improvement company, but we focus on what we call the sometimes forgotten P of performance improvement, and that's people, and really developing the people that implement the processes. So I learned about ITEN about 2.5 years ago. I was at Venture Cafe up on that second level of 4240, and this force of nature named Melissa Grizzle was wandering around in the hallway talking to people. And I had the very, very good fortune of having Melissa approach me. And as I learned more about ITEN, I remember asking a couple of questions more than once. So you're sure I'd qualify for this? And you're sure this is free? And she reassured me that both of those were true. And so my journey with ITEN has really been terrific. And what I want to talk about just really briefly are 3 of the programs that I found really beneficial: pitch practice, founder to founder, and then what I'll call other really valuable stuff. So pitch practice, I think I was at the very first pitch practice back in early 2019. I am still bootstrapped. I haven't actually been out aggressively looking for investment quite yet, but pitch practice really helped me hone my business case, my business plan, my key messages. I got very, very good feedback, very candid feedback, not only from mentors, but also sometimes the most candid feedback is from other entrepreneurs. Like, what are you doing, man? What is this? You need to make this a whole lot clearer. So pitch practice has been really valuable. And then I attended again last month, just before submitting my Arch Grant proposal. So I found that to be phenomenally important and helpful. Founder to founder, I think, is kind of a underappreciated or under-tapped resource. I love founder to founder, where a small group of us get together. It's pretty unstructured. We talk about what's happening in our world. I love it because I always walk away with great ideas and great advice, but it gives me an opportunity in this theme of, as ML said, entrepreneurs helping entrepreneurs. I can share my experiences. I can share my advice, and hopefully that's helpful to someone. And then finally, there are 2 other key benefits that I've tapped. About this time last year, I learned about the Insight Fellows Consulting project or program at Washington University. I applied, I got accepted. And so I had 4 scary, smart graduate students from Washington University working for me last fall, taking a really deep dive into our competitive analysis. It was phenomenally helpful to me, and I would have not known about that had it not been ITEN. And then finally, just last month, I applied for AWS Activate. Our platform is hosted, my team is hosted on AWS. That's going to be worth over $11,000 to us over the next 18 months. So Connie, thank you. And now I'm finding as I cruise around on the AWS site, there's even more benefits. So again, thanks for letting me tell my story briefly. And I want to say thanks also to the staff. The staff at ITEN are just phenomenal. I really appreciate. They are lean, and sometimes they are respectfully mean when they need to be to tell you what you need to hear. But they also phenomenally encouraging. So thank you.
Thank you, Burl. Thanks for sharing your story and joining us today. The other program that I wanted to touch on is our Investor Readiness Program, which is really a cornerstone program for ITEN, where we help our entrepreneurs prepare to speak to investors really for the first time beyond friends and family. So they're going outside of friends and family to a public audience to ask for money and raise money for their business. And that program consists of our entrepreneurs and residents are working with companies at that time. The mock angel presentation process, very much like a Shark Tank experience. We prepare them for the due diligence process. And in the end, we provide introduction to the investor community once they graduate the program. And along the way, they too have the opportunity to take advantage of some service provider perks that are provided from professional service firms in our community. Last year, 52 of our companies raised over $30 million. And in tracking our 74 graduates of the Investor Readiness Program, they've raised over $200 million to date. So great success there, and great opportunities have come from that. I want to introduce you now to Muriel Gaither, who's the founder and CEO of Venku. And she is currently in the program and approaching her graduation. And so we thought it would be nice if Muriel could give some of her perspective about her experience in the Investor Readiness Program. Muriel?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you so much for this honor of being able to speak during the Impact Report. My company, Venku, which we were formerly Outside 360, now Venku, we are a marketplace platform that connects people with authentic, unique outdoor experiences. So I'm not sure if you guys know this or not, but 144 million Americans spend a good portion of their year engaged in outdoor activities like hunting and fishing and camping. But many of them cite that some of the challenges that they face are really finding good quality experiences, especially that are close to them. So our solution is a robust platform that really literally guides people to discover and book these unique, incredible outdoor experiences in over 40 states across America. We provide all of the tools that hosts need to be able to create the custom packages that guests are looking for and publish their listings, make them live for the entire world to be able to see and access. What we are doing is even more relevant now in a post-COVID world. Our platform is serving the greater good by increasing access to and increasing opportunities for people to recreate safely in the great outdoors. We are at the convergence of the outdoor industry and the fast-growing experiences economy, which puts us in a great position to help more people connect outdoors in the future. So ITEN has just been phenomenal. We have absolutely loved the program, and I feel at times kind of guilty that we have really just taken as much as we possibly can, soaked it all up. When we first came to ITEN early last year, we were just post-launch with our MVP product, although we didn't realize it was our MVP at the time. It was an MVP. We really thought that we could just launch our website and people would come, and that was it. No, that is not what happened at all. So when we started to explore what kind of resources were out there and resources that could help us really identify what steps we needed to take to grow in the right direction and to start scaling, we learned that there was this organization out there called ITEN, and immediately got in contact with them, and it was really exciting to get accepted into the program and just start learning about all of the different programs that ITEN encapsulated. So what we learned pretty quickly is that ITEN is the type of program that you really get out of it what you want to. And so the staff, Mary Louise and Melissa, are seriously fantastic. If you ever, you can pull on them if you need to, or they'll push on you at certain times as well, which is a fantastic balance. It was really great to know that there was always, that there were always people on our side to be able to help us navigate the St. Louis startup ecosystem, which can be kind of complicated, judging by the picture, the pathway, and then also the graph of all of the different resources available. So we attended a lot of events initially, but then pretty quickly learned that our primary need was help with fundraising. And so just like Burl, we found the pitch practices to be just a game changer. In fact, one of the early pitch practice sessions was responsible for kind of a mini pivot for our company that just has changed the course of our company and actually enabled us to have a future. So we found that during the pitch practice, it was really a safe environment, but just like Burl mentioned, nobody holds back. So that was really helpful because there were some really tough questions asked, and you know, moments of soul searching, of wondering, okay, well, if I'm not conveying this clearly enough, is this the right message, or is this, you know, is this the right goal or mission? So really caused us to do a lot of reflection. And the great thing about that program is that it's open. I think it used to be on a monthly basis. I'm not sure if it still is, but so every month every month you could come back with a tweaked pitch or a brand new pitch or something experimental and get pretty instant feedback on it, which was fantastic and definitely not something that was available elsewhere. I can honestly say that if it were not for ITEN, we would not have advanced to Arch Grants finalist stage last year, and we would not have gotten into Capital Innovators. ITEN and Mary Louise and the other mentors were just incredibly important in providing feedback on our pitch and really patient with me sending different versions over and over again and looking through all of it really carefully. So we will forever be grateful to them for that. And then two, when we set our eyes on the Missouri Tech Corporation, Mary Louise and ITEN was there as well to help us through that process, help connect us with folks and where we need to go, and help us learn whether the program was right for us. So ITEN has been the common denominator for us every step of the way in this entrepreneurial journey. And we could not be more grateful for the programming, the expertise, the support, and especially the community that ITEN provides. So thank you all so much for that.
Thank you, Muriel, for the very kind words, and also for being a very committed and hardworking entrepreneur, because you definitely gave what it, you know, you stood up and did what you needed to do and listened and made great improvements and progress along the way. So thank you and congratulations to you.
Thank you.
So with that, you know, we love our mentors, we love our entrepreneurs, but we also love our community, because we know that we can't do this alone. And some of our entrepreneurs, Muriel just mentioned some of the organizations we work with, but the ecosystem is so important to supporting and making our entrepreneurs successful. And we work very closely with all of the ecosystem partners, but we have a group that we call community partners, because we have a little more formalized relationship with them in the way that we work together and we cross-refer entrepreneurs to each other and we support each other's events and things like that. And also our sponsors, the generous people who write checks that support what we do, enable us to have these jobs and provide these programs and services free of charge to entrepreneurs. So we just want to take a moment and say thank you to our community partners, our you know, the other entrepreneur support organizations that are in the community, as well as those that provides financial support to us. And when we looked back over the last year, it was pretty amazing. I recorded and identified that the ITEN staff dedicated over 370 hours to our partners, our community partners programming. And we do that in the best interest of the entrepreneurs we serve. And the result of that is that ITEN companies made 647 connections to either new customers, business partners, investors, or had the opportunity to receive awards based on those connections happening. So those are the meaningful, for the time spent, the meaningful results around why our community and community partners matter so much to us and the entrepreneurs we serve. And as we look at the ecosystem dating back to 2008, the funders, the accelerators, community resources and facilities, the co-working space, it has grown and evolved. Since 2008, there were probably about 20 nodes on the map. And this is what the map looks like today. So it's grown significantly. It's approaching 100 entrepreneur support organizations in the St. Louis ecosystem. And if you can't tell, I'm a numbers person. I like numbers. I like data. And when we look at this, I think the most meaningful call outs to me as why this ecosystem is so important and so critical and why it matters is that ITEN companies represent 60% of Missouri Technology Corporation's portfolio. 53 have received ARCH grants. 23 are in Capital Innovators portfolio. Muriel mentioned they are one. 19 participated in Square One programming in the past year. And one of our newest partners, SLU Startup, they have the NSF I-Core program, which is focused on really early stage and the customer discovery process. In less than a year, we've referred 20 companies to participate in that program alone. So I just wanted to throw those kind of points, data points out to you, because this map is, you know, some people call it the kind of crazy spaghetti map. And it's like, how do you make sense of it? But to me, that's how I make sense of it. That's how we make sense of it, is looking at it and seeing how we're making connections on behalf of our entrepreneurs in the ecosystem. So as you know, we produce the impact report, and we also produce the ecosystem map, and they're downloadable from our website for you to access right now. So the new maps are up and available. But we're also very excited. This is going to be the second year that we have produced a digital map. And we were able to do that because of the generous support of Cara Stone. And this map is also on our website, and it is updated and managed and maintained in real time. And so it's really kind of the digital version of the ecosystem map, but it allows you more features and functionality, obviously. You can drill down if you're looking for resources or help in a certain area. You can click through, you can drill down, you can look at it geographically. But just wanted to say and stop and take a moment to say thank you to Cara Stone for supporting us and making sure that we can, for a second year now, provide the digital ecosystem map on our website. So don't forget that that's there for you, and that is always growing and evolving and changing. So I just want to say, before we move on to the next segment, I just want to take a moment and say thank you to all of you. It's really an honor and pleasure to work with these brave entrepreneurs that we support. We are so grateful for the support of our mentor community, all of those mentors that volunteer their time, the sponsors that provide us funding, and our community partners who, you know, we couldn't do it without them. And so community partners that are out there today, a big thank you to you. We'd also like to welcome Lindenwood University, who is a new sponsor of ours, and we're very excited about this new partnership. And we are currently working with a team at Lindenwood University right now to kind of develop our strategic program roadmap. And we are going to have some new programming that we're going to be introducing very soon. So look for an announcement probably in about 60 days. We'll let you know about that. And make sure that you're invited to hear the good news that's coming from that. So again, there's a lot to be thankful for and grateful for, and we're appreciative of you and all that you do. So with that, I want to really kind of try to stay on time here. Mark Graffanini and his colleague Claire Tillmont are with us today. And as I mentioned, Cara Stone has been a generous supporter of ours in the last 2 years, specifically with the digital ecosystem map. So we want to thank you again for that. Mark is here today to talk about the impact of on venture capital from COVID-19 and what entrepreneurs should expect really probably in the coming year. Mark is the founding and managing partner of Cara Stone, which is a national law firm focused on transactional law, securities, and corporate financing. And when he left Silicon Valley and returned to his hometown of New Orleans to found Cara Stone, he's successfully worked with clients through various rounds of financing, exits, corporate governance, and fundraising strategy. Over the last 10 years, he's led over 100 financing transactions from seed to IPO. And the companies that Cara Stone has worked with have returned over $600 million to their investors. In addition to his role at Cara Stone, Mark's a busy guy. He's a partner at Calais Capital Ventures. It's a Series A capital venture firm where he's responsible for sourcing, screening, conducting due diligence, negotiating, and advising on portfolio company management. And Mark is, with regard to Calais, has been active in investing in the St. Louis community as well. So we thank him for that too. So with that, I will go ahead, Mark, and we're going to turn it over to you.
Great. And I want to make sure I should be able to share my screen here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
There should be a green button bottom center.
yeah, got it. Okay. All right. All right. All right, well, thank you, Mary Louise, and everyone at ITEN. To follow up on the presentation in general, for the last 10 years, I've had a personal and professional goal. Okay, sorry. Can you? Yeah. I'm sorry, guys.
Hey, everybody.
Hi, how are you?
Good. All right. Does that look right to y'all?
We're seeing the venture capital in the world of COVID-19 slide. Is that what you want us to see?
No, not quite. All right, here we go. So do our best here. All right. So I'm Mark Gaffanini. I'm originally from New Orleans. I was in Silicon Valley for a while where I really got exposed to the world of angel and venture capital. And for the last 10 years, my main thesis as a professional that's been doing this for a while has been that the most vibrant companies of the future are going to emerge from places like Louisiana, Missouri, Arkansas, Tennessee, places that are outside of Silicon Valley for a number of reasons. Partially because some of those places have sort of become a bit of an echo chamber. I think, and to some degree, places on the coast have become a little bit out of touch with reality. And lastly, I think the final frontier for technological innovation is taking things from, quote, more traditional industries and doing technology around them. And the results, I think, have been proven in the success of our clients. So the reality is we've done well over $1 billion worth of angel and venture capital deals over the last 10 years. And we do about 25 to 40 venture capital deals, meaning, $2 or more million per year. We've done over $1 billion worth of exits for companies, including, I think what was the biggest non-Silicon Valley IPO in 2018 for a company called Waiter. And I think that's testament to the fact that smart investors around the world are looking at investing in companies in places like Missouri. And part of the mission that I've had for a number of years was to start bringing some data around the discussion about financing in places out of Silicon Valley, because I think what tends to happen in places with a lot less data about the actual deal market is that people speak in terms of abstractions, and therefore they're not as able to efficiently guide themselves toward getting checks that are written. As Mary Louise also pointed out, I've been fortunate enough to be a founding partner of Calais Capital Ventures, which is a Series A fund, does $1 to $2 million checks, and has a specific mandate to invest in St. Louis and more broadly Missouri companies, along with several other states that we look at in our investment criteria. So with that, I wanted to start off, before I get into what the numbers look like for the market as a whole in Missouri, to talk about what's on most companies' minds and most accelerators' minds. What is happening in the world of venture capital in light of COVID-19? And I think the first thing that I want to reassure everyone on is that most definitely venture capital groups are still investing. And I think that there are a number of venture capital funds that have paused new investments in new companies. There are a number of venture capital funds that are evaluating their portfolios, and there are a number of companies or venture capital groups that have to answer to their own investors about what the future holds. So I do think that for the most part, we've seen some pauses in some VCs investing activity, meaning that they've explicitly told clients that we've worked with, for example, that their investors, because if you don't know, you should know that venture capital groups are comprised of their own investors, usually called LPs typically. Some of them have had to explicitly hold and go back to their LPs and explain before they do new investment activity what their outlook on the world is going to be. There are some venture capital groups that I know have told us that their LPs have asked them not to do further capital calls. So again, if you want to peer a little bit behind the curtain in venture capital groups don't raise their entire funds like a company often does in one single closing. They call capital over a period of time, and then they invest that capital. So more than one venture capital group has told us and asked us to fill in maybe where they haven't, where those two things are going on behind the curtain. So I think that what's important for companies that are out there looking to raise capital, what's important for them to know is that there is a sense among venture capital groups that they do need to conserve capital for their current existing portfolio companies that might face trouble because of COVID-19. So there's going to be a preference in most funds that have been around for a while to hold back on new investments and focus on making sure they have enough capital to get their portfolio companies through the challenge. I think the number two thing that I've noticed both as a VC, but also in the deals that we've done in the post-COVID era, is that what I call fluff decks almost need to be taken out of the equation for companies. And what do I mean by fluff decks? Fluff decks are decks that a company might give at a demo day or a pitch event or a Shark Tank type thing that are more about the business and the team. They're kind of fuzzy in nature. They're explaining, I think, more about the business than most VCs actually already know. So as a partner in a venture capital fund, I get a dozen decks a week at least to look at that have gone through screening already. The decks that do not start off with metrics about the traction of the business are going to have a very hard time getting to even detailed conversations with a VC fund right now. So funds like Calais Capital Ventures that are investing in companies, we have a specific mandate. We closed a fund before COVID. Our LPs are expecting us to actively invest. We are looking for companies that are demonstrating traction, and we are looking for companies that are able to help reassure us that if anything, COVID is going to accelerate their traction, but more than likely it's not going to have a defining impact on the business. So if companies are sending decks without those kinds of traction related metrics highlighted at the forend and addressing kind of the issue head on, if instead they're sending pitch decks or they're meeting people and they're kind of taking the I guess the more fuzzy approach about what the business is and the team and things like that, I think you're going to have a hard time standing out amongst the peers that you're competing with for financing dollars. So I think you want to really focus on those kinds of things. And for seed and angel groups, in times like COVID, unfortunately, it's very hard. It's always very hard to get seed and pre-traction funding that is kind of more in the nature of, look, we're just trying this out. We haven't really had any traction yet. So if you're pre-Series A, it's very hard to get funding. But what happened in the last recession, and what I think will continue to happen this recession, is that there are a number of investors that are angels that get a little bit scared of the volatility in the public stock market, and they tend to take a little bit more allocation and start testing the waters in angel and seed deals. We're certainly seeing that with our Cara Stone clients, and I think that's what the data bore out last time. The final thing I want to say about COVID is that I think knowing your market numbers is more important now than ever. So one of the most critical mistakes that companies make when raising money is that they just don't match the ask to what's feasible in a particular market. And I think that this fundamentally, the root cause of this is a lack of information, which is one of the things that we try to solve through vc.carastone.com. So we really dig into the numbers and all the markets where we're active, where we represent clients and where I'm an active investor. And we usually start with an overview of the system. So if you look at Missouri as a system, which I think is the right kind of framework, you'll see that it's fairly healthy compared to similar sized states. In fact, at the end of the presentation, I'll get into why I'm pretty optimistic overall about Missouri. But in general, in any given year, about 75 financing deals happen for venture capital in Missouri. And those are a combination of late stage, early stage seed, and kind of mid stage companies. But we peg the number at about 75. And I think although most of the time people in policy making or maybe accelerators are most interested in this number because they want to know like how many of our cohort companies are the ones in this number, I think that's valuable. I think founders should pay a lot more attention to it too when crafting their fundraising strategy, because ultimately what it gets to is what are your chances of being one of the 75 deals that are getting funded that year. I can tell you if you look behind the 75 and you drill down, you'll see that probably about a third or so are going to be early stage, and you're going to see the rest divided between mid and late stage. So you might say, well, I have a 1 in 75 chance, but really it's actually much lower. So it becomes incumbent upon the top performing founders. You have to be an expert in your business, but as you're navigating fundraising, you have to be an expert in the financing market, the venture capital financing market, both in your home state, then in the central of the United States, and then you have to kind of know what's going on the coast. So without that knowledge, you're basically almost guaranteeing that people that do that homework are going to have a better edge over you when competing for limited dollars. So I think that's the main thing. A tremendous amount of money has actually been raised in the last 9 or 10 years. Close to $2 billion has been raised over that time period. And there's about $215 million worth of venture capital put into Missouri-based companies in any given 1 year period. So that's kind of the breakdown. But again, in these smaller markets outside of New York and Silicon Valley, you tend to see the numbers. You have some later stage deals in each year that account for a big chunk of that 215 million. So as you're thinking about where your round sits into everything else, you need to kind of gauge that. So where do I see this most applicable? When companies are coming and they're telling me we're pre-revenue, pre-stage, but we're raising $3 million at a $10 million valuation. You are going to have a very hard time doing that unless you have some very, very exceptional things that are going on. But with the right information, you can adopt, a milestone or tranche-based strategy that gets you where you need to be with local investors. And that's the number one thing that we believe. Another key thing that I think that founders need to know is what is the average and median deal size? And that's kind of the starting place. So once again, if you're looking at the market as a whole, you want to kind of know, all right, what kind of deals on average are Missouri companies raising? And typically it's about, on average, a $2.8 million round. So that includes the big ones, the really small ones. You make an average of that, it's about $2.8 million in any given one round. Any given one deal, the median number is only about 800,000. So again, information like that ought to prompt either an advisor or a founder to benchmark what their ask is to what the market is actually bearing out. And you should realize that the market data that we collect is basically reflecting deals that have closed. So it has a closing bias, but that's really solid information here because you want to know what are people actually raising, not what are people asking for. So there are a lot of companies, for example, that are asking for way too much money that their current traction cannot support, and then they fail. And then people say, oh, it's really hard to raise money here. The people that know, for example, look, if the median deal size is only about 800,000, you may want to look at putting your fundraising ask and building your company growth in something like 500,000 to $1 million increments. You probably have a lot more appetite for those size rounds. And then once you're later stage and you can compete with Silicon Valley and New York companies and go for bigger rounds, you'll be in a position to do that. So that's another thing that we put out here. But it's important also for people to think about, once you know the average and median as a market as a whole, you say, well, what do SaaS companies, for example, do? Well, on average, they do actually 2.6 million, and the median round size for a SaaS company is about 1 million. If you look at agritech, it's different. The average deal size is much bigger, as you might think, as you might expect. It's a more capital intensive, typically type of business. So the average agri-tech deal or ag tech deal is 5.6 million. The median is 1.5. So, there's layers of data and layers of information that I think people need in order to be successful. And the place to start is the overall market, and then go down to the average and median in each particular industry segment as you're crafting your fundraising strategy. And if you go to vc.carastone.com, you sign up for our updates, you will get deep dives into all these different things. So we put, some good general market information for people as a resource, and then you'll get very deep dives to help you craft your financing strategy much more specifically. So when you go to ITEN's digital ecosystem map, you see here are all these funding groups that write checks to Missouri companies. By the way, we need to get our fund on there too. You also want to know, what do their deals actually look like? And you can find that out. We have that information. We know pretty much what every individual group in Missouri's check size looks like, as well as their deal terms. And that comes from a lot of work, but we provide that as a resource for the market. So for venture capital by entity type, this is another really important thing I think for people to think about, especially in a post-COVID world. In any, if you look at financing deals in the Missouri market or any other market for that matter, I think as a market as a whole, close to 87% probably of venture and angel deals from formal angel groups and actual venture capital funds are invested into C corporations, Delaware C corporations. We see a lot of seed and angel deal companies get started as an LLC. And that makes it very difficult, if not impossible, to take money from more professionalized groups as they go on. So if you look at all the deals in Missouri since 2016, 65% of the total number of deals and 67% of the dollars invested have been in corporations. So it's pretty overwhelming that when you're going out there and you're starting the fundraising process, one of the major check the box items that an investor is going to have is, aside from what I told you a minute ago, having a realistic sense of what the funding market looks like, meaning like, what do check size actually look like from people? I think another really one that's high up there is, do these folks understand the kinds of corporate structure and document things that they're getting into by asking for money? And I think you can save yourself a lot of headache and avoid one of those things that complicates your deal. So if you're an LLC and you have a lot of interest from an investor and a VC fund, you'll be able to get the deal done if the company's good enough, and you can reorganize and convert at that time. But it's another thing that has to go in there, increases the deal cost. It's better if you clear out that hurdle ahead of time. But there's actual data about this. So I know sometimes this kind of becomes a debate among advisors and people volunteering in different programs, and that the actual data doesn't leave much for debate. It's pretty overwhelming that corporations raise more money than groups like LLCs. So another way to think about your competition for a limited number of dollars, that 1% of companies that get venture and angel capital, is what industry you are in. And in Missouri, like in a lot of states these days, in terms of the number of deals, SaaS is the overall undisputed champ in terms of number of deals. So over the last 9 years or so, 226 individual VC deals have happened in the SaaS category. Next closest category is biotech, which has about 119. And if you add the other biotech adjacent things, it gets a little bit up there, but it's still less than SaaS. So look, these are easier companies to get funded than others. Ag tech, on the other hand, may have fewer deals, but it has a lot of dollars typically invested. But in this particular case, the numbers are really looking like SaaS companies have raised about $587 million over the last 9 years. Biotech has raised about $450 million in that same period. So they're pretty close in terms of the actual dollars raised, but in terms of number of deals, your likelihood for SaaS companies goes up. And I think that makes sense, right? The world is moving digitally. It costs less to do those things, et cetera. In terms of where companies are that are raising money, St. Louis is the clear winner. And so there's 404 deals that we tag to St. Louis, about 97 to Kansas City, and then another 200 or so spread around the state over that kind of 9-year period. So there's a lot of good resources in St. Louis, a lot of great expertise. and it's looking good if you're in St. Louis to raise money. So I part of my goal, aside from helping that general thesis emerge that the best companies of the future are coming from these places outside of Silicon Valley, I try to help put things into context for people, because a lot of media covers our venture and angel capital reports for various states, and a lot of times the headlines are all about comparing whatever state we're in and working with to Silicon Valley and Silicon Alley in New York. And the reality is that's comparing apples to oranges. So, these are a list of some of the states that the venture capital fund I'm a partner in covers. So we cover Tennessee, Georgia, Missouri, Louisiana, South Carolina, Arkansas, Alabama, Mississippi, and also a little bit Florida and Texas. All right, we have good relationships there. There's a clear correlation here between population of a state and the amount of capital raised by companies in that state. That's pretty clear. So when people are comparing markets, it's not that helpful to say, St. Louis versus like Palo Alto, that those numbers are going to be dramatically different. It starts to get more interesting to look at states as cohorts in terms of their population size and their geographic region. So that's how I kind of analyze it. And I'm encouraging leaders in the communities and companies to start looking at things that way too. And when you look at states on that basis, you can see who top performers are and aren't. And in this particular case, Tennessee, for example, has a lower population than Georgia, but it has the most deals in terms of, or has the highest amount of capital raised. They are doing something right. That they're having a lot of deals get funded. They're having a lot of capital go in. So it provides a more useful comparison to look at a state like Tennessee, perhaps, for Missouri or Louisiana than it does to look at California or New York. That probably goes without saying, but I don't know that people look at it this closely. Missouri and Louisiana are doing something right, I think, in terms of the amount of capital raised relative to the population. And I think the goal for accelerators, for public policy thinkers, for just scholars of this stuff, is how to get states with 6.5 million people or 4.5 million people up to the funding levels for companies that the states that are more populous with 8 to 10 million people have, because I think it's achievable. So, Tennessee is a good example, close to 6 million population, but they have a whopping over $4 billion worth of deals over those last 7 or 8 years. So that really, that's really important. Also, I think, what I think I'm seeing overall in terms of trends are that there are a lot of funds that are cooperating on funding deals. So I know our very first deal as a venture capital fund was for a Louisiana-based company, but we have participation with St. Louis partners. Our second deal is in a Tennessee company, but it participated in some St. Louis accelerators, and there will be St. Louis folks on the board of that company. So, the reality is that the world is getting smaller, and people in the various ecosystems and markets are, cooperating, sharing deals, helping. I think that's a positive thing for everyone's numbers overall. So we are very proud and very honored to have been a part of facilitating the digital ecosystem map for St. Louis, and we hope to continue to be a part of the St. Louis venture and angel capital community. We have so much information. It's all available for free. We're always happy to help answer any questions you might have, think about things with our fundraising cap on, and do what we can to help you, whether you're part of an accelerator, you're advising companies, or even if you're a venture capital group looking for further information. So thanks again. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm not sure how much time, if any, we have, but
yeah, we definitely thank you, Mark, very much for the presentation, again, for sponsoring our digital map. And yes, we have time for questions. So if anyone has questions and want to submit them via chat, please go ahead and start doing that, and we'll get to those as best as we can.